Good morning. This is Jim Ray with the Road to the Autry Masters. We're talking with artists of the Masters of the American West at the Autry Museum. Today, we are fortunate to have with us William Acheff from his studio home in Taos, New Mexico. Bill is a legendary Trump loyal painter. For those of you who are not familiar with that term, it means I create paintings that fool the eye. I think that's literally what it means in French. Welcome, Bill. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, I'm happy to be here. Happy to be home.
And we're happy to have you here as well. So, Bill, I like to start these things off inquiring about your artistic upbringing. Would you share with us a little bit about your road to becoming the master artist that you are?
Well, I think a lot of the guys can say that, they always had this knack for art when they were young, and I am included in that group, I guess. And I think when I was in high school, I was going to be a math major. That was my intention, and then I got back into art and started taking art classes, and that took over my focus in high school. And then, fine arts 1 and 2, freehand drawing 1 and 2, commercial art, then stage crafts, painting sets. And I had no intention of going into art. I just loved these classes. I thought that the end result would be an art teacher, which is something I didn't want to do. So I didn't go to art college. Actually, I didn't go to college. I didn't want to because I gave up on the math thing, and then I just wanted to get away from kids my own age, be around older people. And I went to barber college 2 weeks after I graduated from high school, and then I was going to have a fancy, hairstyling salon and all that. And then I met this artist. 2.5 years into cutting hair, Italian artist came into the shop and we started talking about art. And then I ended up leaving that shop and went to another shop for a year. And then I came back, and the first day I was there, he came in and he goes, "You're back." It's like we were, we're just the best of friends. And he was from Milano, and he studied at the Royal Academy of Fine Arts in Rome. And we started talking, and he had a class, and he invited me to his class. And I went to his class, drawing class, and expecting great students. Turns out my drawing was the best drawing in the class, and he was all excited, apparently. I didn't know that, but his wife told me years later that he was looking for that one student. And I happened to be the one, because when they were going up from the studio that night, I guess, the first night I was there, he said to his wife, "He's got it." So I was the guy. And then after that, he started me on painting. And then a month later, he told me that I could make a living at this if I studied with him for 6 months to a year. And I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I was 22 years old, and I just went for it. So I worked with him, or in a studio really, for 6 months. And he says, "Save up 12 paintings and we'll take them to a gallery in 6 months or so, and then get you started." And that's how it began. And it's mostly fruit and silver and artifacts like that. And I was looking for something. I studied a lot of books and saw the early Dutch painters at the De Young Museum in San Francisco. And I always thought that I missed out on something, 200 years too late, with the great artifacts and all this. And then I met this guy that worked for these art dealers in LA that I was selling to, and he told me that I should go to Santa Fe. This is in 1973. And he says, "There's a guy there that has a gallery, Dwight Roberts. He's an artist. He could get you started in the area." I showed him your work. So after months of listening to this, I decided to go to Santa Fe. And as I was driving out, the guy said, I called Tom, the friend of mine, told me about this guy, Dwight Roberts, and his wife answered the phone and says, "I'm sorry to tell you this, but he died."
Not a
I had
laughing matter, but
yeah, and I was all packed, and at a phone booth, and my girlfriend was in that car and the truck, and I said, I'm going anyway, so came out here and met his wife who ran the gallery, and then couldn't find a place to live in Santa Fe, and I said, listen, I heard about this Taos, this art town called Taos, and so we came up here, and just one small little town. She loved it, but I wanted to be in Santa Fe, closer to the gallery, and couldn't find a place in Santa Fe, so I came back up here. And the minute I did a painting, it was like magic. There were some plums on this tree in the backyard of this place I rented, and pulled them off the tree and did a painting. It was like unbelievable. It just felt perfect. And after 3 months, I took my girlfriend back to San Francisco. She couldn't take it up here. So that I knew that this was going to be the place for my career. I had to stay put because I was planning on moving somewhere else, after 6 months. And then I think about 8 months later, I discovered these old artifacts, pots and the corn, just things about New Mexico. And then I started painting them, and that clicked. And I realized months later, I realized that I had found what I was looking for, these old artifacts. And so that's how I applied my training of the, European style of painting it with these American artifacts. And that's how it began. And then just went crazy with the pots and all the artifacts. And so I just kept developing. And, in the beginning, it was always wanting to make something look real. And then I started focusing on style or, arrangements and balance and all that. So that's how it basically just developed, and developed techniques for beads, that was in around 1976 or so, 75 maybe. Yeah, just expanded. And then I discovered these, back then, there was some information about, what's his name? The guy that did all the photographs, Curtis.
Yeah.
And so I saw a few books on him, and I thought, I wonder if I could paint that photo. And so that began the use of his artifacts. I was able to extend the theme of what I was painting with the photo.
And I'll make a comment here that many of Bill's works include a photograph scotch taped to the wall behind the artifacts that he's painting, and it's a perfect reproduction of the photograph and the piece of scotch tape, along with the artifacts that are laying in the foreground.
Yeah, and that was, I think it was around 1975, I painted my first Curtis. And I decided to use the scotch tape as sort of a contemporary touch to these old artifacts. And then just develop more and more and more. And as time goes on, you just see more. I paint from life. So when you're looking at something a long time, for days that you're painting, you start seeing more and more subtle aspects of the painting, of the artifacts. And then you also see the space, the depth. And so I was able to capture that depth that way, rather than, I don't paint from photographs, unless I'm painting a photograph, but it's an object. So you see, I'm getting my information from life, which I think is important. I've always done it. So even in high school, we did drawings and paintings from life. So I think that makes a difference, and does. And in my style, it affects the realism.
Yeah, we're gonna see some examples when we take a look at the work that you're working on for this year, or that you've done now for the Masters this year. But one of the things that you're famous for, and people have noticed with great incredulity, is you do these beaded moccasins, and every bead on the moccasin has its own specular highlight. I mean, it's just
Yeah.
the level of detail. I don't
Well, it's,
understand.
yeah.
I don't understand how your vision is held up under all of that duress. But
Well, the paint is thicker, so it has its own body in a sense, and so it would actually reflect light because it has some rise to it.
yeah.
So I don't
Let's
know.
talk about your as your career has advanced, and it has advanced to the kind of the highest levels in the industry. You're in the Masters in the American West for many years. You've been in the Prix de West at the National Cowboy Museum for
Sure.
many years. How did your career get to a point that you got up into those pretty highly acclaimed exhibitions?
Well, I think it was in '75. Ray Vanella told me I should show my work to Pat Shriver at the Shriver Gallery in Taos. And I knew Ray, I knew Walt and those guys. And Ray said, "Oh, you ought to show her your work." And it was just when I was starting to paint pots, the native pieces. And so I went up there and I showed her a painting, and she was all excited. And they were moving their gallery from the Gaspard House to downtown, and so I was in that gallery, and she had Lockheed, Snydell, a lot of the cowboy artists,
Yeah.
Harvey Johnson, I think Bettina Sankey sometimes, Clark Hewlins once in a while, and then then the local Taos guys. And I got to know Gordon Snydell, and apparently he was observing my work. And so in 1978, he called me and he wanted me to be in the Western Heritage Sale. And I thought, whoa. I asked him am I ready for that? And he says, you are. So that was my first. So I was only showing in one gallery, basically, the Shriver Gallery. So I was known through their collectors, but Gordon knew my work because he showed in that gallery. And that was the show that mushroomed my notoriety. And that was in 1979. There were 5 council members, I guess, art council members in Snydell, Lovell, Lockheed, Melvin Warren. I can't think of the last. Oh, Tom Lovell, and they each was to pick an up and coming artist to be in the show. So Gordon picked me. I think. Let's see. Tom Lovell picked Martin Greeley. I think because James Bourne was, he picked his daughter Nancy, and then Melvin Warren picked his daughter, and I'm sure that James Bourne mentioned to Tom to pick Martin. So and then Lockheed picked Wayne Wolf because he was studying with him, and so we were like the 5 up and coming artists, and it was like an explosion of notoriety after that show. And then in 1981, I had a painting that sold for $45,000 at auction. It was like unbelievable. I mean, I normally would have sold for $7,000, but it was a violin on a wall with the sheet music to the Yellow Rose of Texas, and a photo of a yellow rose taped to the wall, and I call it the Yellow Rose of Texas. And not knowing the real history of the song, I just remembered that song when I was in 5th grade in California. We used to have those May Day dances, and I remember another class was doing their dance and marching to the Yellow Rose of Texas, and it was just like a great song and lively. And so I did that song, and that painting of that song in a tradition of Harnett. He painted the violin on the wall. That was where I got that was that influence. But I did it with a story of the Yellow Rose of Texas in a sense. So it turns out it was the Sam Houston's Army's marching song, and it was about his mulatto girlfriend. So it was it was part of history.
Did not know that.
Yeah. So it was a big deal. And I didn't know it was bigger than I thought it was. And so it just went nuts. And I was in my head went numb, I guess. So that was the big moment.
Okay. So I'm gonna see if I can find that painting, Yellow Rose of Texas, and put it up behind this as you
Sure.
were talking about it. Let's talk about the works that you've sent over to us for the Masters show. I think the catalog piece was Enough War. You wanna talk about that bad boy?
Oh yeah, that started out as it's gonna be just a simple portrait of an old Indian guy, and then after this Ukraine war started, I started thinking of changing it, or changing the theme in a sense, or the title to Enough War. And because he has that look on his face of a tired warrior. And so I added the arrows, he's holding the arrows, and then I added the ribbon on the blanket, which are the Ukrainian colors, because traditionally Native American blankets have ribbons sewn on the blanket, whether on the edge or in the middle or something, and it's like a satin color, various colors, but
Yeah.
I added the Ukrainian colors. So that's a current history and using an old image theme, I guess. So a little story,
Good storytelling.
Yeah.
So this next one, you've mentioned your pots and you've mentioned your moccasins and so on, and they're well featured here. I think this is your miniature for the show, Teaching Children. Tell us a little bit about that.
The Teaching Children.
Yeah.
That's the small version of a larger one I have. The larger one has a image in it. Well, the image in the other one, the larger one, which I have here, is of a house on the wall of the father and his son outside, and the father sitting down and the son is playing with a butterfly. So I took that theme as teaching children about wildlife and nature, and then I decided to make a small version with those same artifacts and the same arrangement of figures. And like those clay figures, the ducks, those would have been made in a kiva with the children to teach them about wildlife.
Mhm.
And then there's a stone piece there, but that's an older piece. That's 100 years, at least 150 years old. That's a mountain lion. So that was the theme of that, teach, because when they're in the kiva, they learn about nature and the beginning and of their tribe and all that. So that's what that's about, teaching children. But it's universal in teaching children things in any country, any background, teaching children. But this is a Native American theme, so that's what that's about. And then the pot with the fetishes. The one long fetish on the right is an Avanyu, which is a water serpent, and that is traditional in the Pueblos in the Southwest. Water serpent means the water snake. If there's a water serpent, that means there's water, and water is the most valuable thing in the Southwest because it's so arid here. Without water, they can't grow crops, fertilize crops or whatever. So that's what that's about. And then there's a seashell in there, which they found, I'm sure, somewhere, because there used to, it was an ocean here at one time. So that represents water. And then the arrowhead were for hunting. So so it's all about teaching children, about nature and their life, so their history.
Okay. And the last one we've got here, again, featuring your beaded moccasins and featuring an image up on the wall, red moccasins and drumsticks.
Yeah, that's a Taos print on the wall, and he's repairing drumsticks. I don't know if you can tell from how I painted it, but it's so small. But he's repairing a drumstick. He's holding a drumstick, and there's a firelight, and there's a pot, traditional Taos piece. And so I used these red moccasins and drumsticks that I have, and just to tie it to that theme of Taos. So that's it. And then, but there's a trompe l'oeil piece of full in the eye with those beads and all that. So it has that artistic quality and also a theme with the drumsticks, and of course the moccasins are great artifact. So
Yeah, I've got one of your paintings here. You're well familiar with it, Dear Heart. My
yeah,
father used to go up and look at those moccasins and almost touch them to see if the beads are real.
right.
And I said, Dad,
Yeah,
it's paint. It's just paint, Dad.
yeah, yeah. At the Western Heritage Sale, the first year, two guys at the party and at the show, two guys were drinking, I guess, and they were arguing. Those are painted. Those are real. Those are painted. And then they got me over there to tell me, asked me if they were real or they were painted, and I said they were painted.
Yeah.
So that was a really fool the eye.
Yeah. So the last thing I like to explore with the artist is your process and how it's evolved over the years. Talk a little bit about your process and what. I guess the first question I ask is, how do you know you've got a subject that you want to do? What tells you this is something I want to capture in my art? And how has that process evolved over the years?
Well, it's always been an artifact. If I see a pot I like, or another art, a spiritual artifact or something, that is the, or even that, or a certain photo or print that I see that I can build around and create a painting, a theme. I don't paint, really historical themes or historical stories. I like to do something that has a contemporary touch to it or something that's today, because really over the history of man, nothing has changed. We think the same. It's just what our environment is, how we think. So there's just the same sense of feeling and all this. So if I see an artifact, I just try to develop a theme around that. Whether it's, it could be just moccasins or, a pot, or it could be led by the photo. The print I use will determine some of the artifacts that I use. So that's basically how I do it. And I get them and I set them up. I have a lot of pots, so the moccasins. So I just set it up and try to get it balanced, how I think it's going to look. Then I decide the size, vertical and horizontal ratio. I never know the size until I really set it up, or the ratio. But there are sizes that I generally use, commonly use. So, and then I have a cardboard. I just make a little window out of cardboard, certain ratio. It represents maybe a 16 by 20 or maybe a longer one. And I just hold it in, I set up the painting or the artifacts, and I hold it in front of me and I look through there, try to see if it balances. And that's how I set up a painting. And if it looks right, or I could move the object, or say, well, there's nothing here, there's too much weight over here, not enough here, something like that. Or I can make it shorter, the painting shorter. So that's how I determine the size and the ratio of the height and width of a painting, and setting it up. Because years ago, my early days, I did a 1824, I think, horizontal, and I drew it in and painted it, and I realized I had too much space on the right. So I said, this is not good. So this framer actually in San Francisco where I showed says you could cut these little squares of your ratio of your canvas and hold it there, and you can frame your painting and your artifact and see what it looks like. So that's what I did. So I always do that.
Lock in your aspect ratio.
Yeah. So then I have a balance. I don't have to deal with cutting the canvas or, dealing with it. So it's foolproof for me. So that's how I do it.
Has your process pretty much remained the same over the years, or has it is evolved in
actually the same
ways?
Yeah, it's the same in that. Well, I would say originally I would wash everything in with a light wash, and just to cover the canvas, the white canvas. And then later I thought, well, I don't need to do that. I just start painting. Like I'll just start painting the pot and then everything around it. And then so I don't do preliminaries. That'll stop after 3 rings. I don't do a preliminary sketch. I just go for it. I set it up, make sure it's just balanced right the way I want it. I draw a center line on the canvas and then go for it. I just start painting. It's there. It's not going to move. I'm not doing a painting from a photo where I have to whatever they do. I don't know how but that's how I do it.
Okay.
And my drawing is not like, if you were to take a photo of my setup, the artifacts on a table or something, several artifacts and then you would compare it with my drawing, it's going to be different because the drawing is going to vary, but anyway, I make it look like it's how I want it to look rather than what the camera says.
Yeah.
So it's all a big difference.
Okay.
There's just so much more information from life than there is from photographs.
Yeah.
No matter what. I think today though, with digital cameras, you get a lot of detail. You could just zoom that thing in there, I guess. I don't do this, but I heard that you could just zoom in there and get all that detail. But I don't want all that detail. I want, even though my paintings are detailed, or they seem to be, I want the realism, the illusion of depth, the illusion of space between the objects, because you can't paint that space unless you see it. And you can't see it unless you're looking at the real thing.
And
It's
that's,
like painting outdoors, I think. A lot of landscape painters that paint outdoors, they have that atmosphere when they paint. And then they go in the studio and they have that recall, and they can do larger pieces.
Yeah.
So, that's my personal opinion.
I think that probably describes a good part of the secret of your mastery.
Yeah, probably. Yeah.
So, Bill, I really appreciate your sitting down and taking some time to talk with us today. It was very informative. Hope that we get to see you in February at the Masters of the American West. And thanks again for joining us.
Yeah, great. Yeah, I hope it's a good show.
Looking forward to it.
Okay,
Thanks.
great.